let me introduce you to our guest. Gabriel Nadale is National Director of Our American, an organisation working to support American values. John Neffinger is a Democratic strategist and former communications director of the Democratic National Committee. And William Courtney is an adjunct senior fellow at the RAND think tank and a former US ambassador to Kazakhstan and Georgia, not where we just were, but the country of Georgia. So, Gabriel, let me start with you. I think the big question is why? Why did we see what we saw, which the polls were telling us it was going to be so close, and it wasn't. There was quite a reasonable swing to Trump.
Of course, one of the most important demographics that voted for Trump or really came in support for Trump was the Latino vote. We were seeing some exit polls that shows that President Trump won 45% of the Latino vote. And particularly when it comes to men, he won by about, I believe, 52% of the Latino vote. And I think it's very important because one of the things that Latino men or Hispanic communities, myself being from, and I'm a Mexican immigrant, what we really care about is about somebody who's going to do what to make groceries cheaper, to make sure that the cost of gas is less expensive, make sure that freedom of speech and freedom of religion are protected. These are the issues that are really important to Latino communities. It's something that Kamala just failed to do.
William, let me ask you about, mentioned groceries there. I mean, this sort of bears out, doesn't it, the wisdom more than 30 years ago, 32 years ago, of James Carville, the advisor to Bill Clinton. It's the economy, stupid.
Yes, it's not foreign policy. It's the economy and also a cultural shift as well, a combination of those two. So key issues such as Ukraine, Middle East, China, they really didn't seem to play a significant role in the campaign, but they will play an important role in President Trump's presidency.
What's your take on it, John? What did your party do wrong? I mean, if you look at it on paper, it was a textbook campaign. Perhaps the one exception was the Arab American voters, and she didn't reach out to them, and she didn't at the convention, and she didn't go to Dearborn at any point. But apart from, leave that to one side, it was a very short campaign.
It was.
She had more money.
It was.
She had more advertising. She had a better ground game.
She did.
And it didn't work. Is it time to completely rethink how you do political campaigns now?
Well, two separate questions there. The first one, yes, she had a lot of advantages in terms of the structure of the campaign. I do think there were some interesting things happening on the ground game for the Trump campaign, specifically with their outreach to the Latino community. And I think we will come to understand more about that and how that exactly unfolded in the days and weeks to come. I do think for Kamala Harris, she had a wonderful introduction after Joe Biden stepped aside and the party united behind her. She had her coming out at the convention, and she also did very well at the debate. Through all of that, she was what we might term in the political consulting business, the joyful warrior. People saw someone who was going to be upbeat, forward-looking, address their problems, and somebody who they would be happy to see on their TV.
But she tried to be the change candidate, and yet she's been in that White House.
Well, she's been somewhere
around that White House for the last 4 years. It's pretty impossible, wasn't it?
Well, she did a good job of it there for a while. After all, she wasn't bragging about the fact that she didn't have much power or decision-making authority as a vice president, but people saw her as a fresh face, certainly after Joe Biden, and were relieved to get to have somebody who wasn't pushing 80 years old that they might have an opportunity to vote for. But as that change candidate and that sort of freshness, it wore off. And that was part of the Trump campaign's theory, was that there would be a honeymoon period, people would be excited, fresh new face, and then maybe sort of regress to the mean, if you will. And what I think the Harris campaign may be rethinking this morning is that in the last several weeks, she had a lead in the polls, a clear lead of the polls, and it seemed like she was maybe being a little more cautious, not going out there and saying, hey, this is going to be great, here are all the things we're going to do. And in fact, the other thing that she introduced down the very home stretch was raising the profile of her attacks on Trump, condemning him for violation of democratic norms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we've heard a lot of that from Democrats for a lot of years now, and people, I think, are tired of hearing that. They know it already. and don't want to be told to eat their vegetables and that they're a bad person if they even consider voting for Donald Trump.
You mentioned the polls there, Gabriel, the polls. I mean, more elections. There'll be midterms in 2 years, then other presidential elections 2 years after that. Should we even bother reading the polls anymore? I mean, they always get it wrong.
You know, the polls are very interesting. And one thing that we have known is that President Trump is a very unique candidate. He continues to beat the polls time and time again. This is the third time he's beat the polls. But I think that one thing that we have to consider is one thing that you said at the end, that people are sick and tired of relitigating World War II. People time and time again just saying like, oh, he's Stalin, she's Stalin, or he's a fascist, he's Nazi. People care about the issues that are going on right now, the issues that people care about. And, you know, my wife, she's Hispanic as well. She's a Mexican. She was born in Los Angeles, but she's Mexican descent. And one of the things that she said, Kamala Harris just does not talk about the issues. And that was her mistake. She refused to go on the Joe Rogan podcast. She refused to go on so many podcasts unless it was very cured for her. And voters, particularly Hispanic voters, they saw right through that. They noticed that she felt entitled to the presidency. She didn't really feel like she cared about the issues that our Americans care about.
OK, William, I want you to step back for a second for our viewers around the world, because it looks like Trump, when he takes office, will be the president, clearly, but he's going to have the Senate. It looks like he's going to have the House. He's going to have, we already know, a Supreme Court that's the majority is favourable to him. And this time it looks like he's going to have the legitimacy of the popular vote. How powerful do all of those things potentially make a president?
They are to some extent indications of power. But let's remember last spring when the high-profile vote took place on aid to Ukraine, military and financial aid, the vote was 3-1 in favor in the House and 4-1 in favor in the Senate. So half the House Republicans voted in favor of that, and even a greater percentage in the Senate.
So the opposition might not be the Democrats, it might be other members of the Republican Party going forward.
A combination.
OK. William, I mean, some people are saying they are worried that the 47th president, Donald Trump, will be different from the 45th president, Donald Trump, because there won't be the guardrails and the grown-ups that were there before. Do you share those fears?
That's possible because at the beginning of the first presidency, he appointed establishment-type figures. This time, he may appoint more ideological. But in foreign affairs, typically the events, the crises, drive issues. So, for example, Gaza, Hezbollah, the Gulf, where the Houthis are attacking commercial shipping, the Russian pressure in Ukraine and the war, those issues are going to require putting together coalitions, both of our allies and partners, but also here in the United States. It's not going to be so easy to make all those decisions based on ideology as opposed to actual practical realities.
And staying with those issues, John, I mean, I was here just a few hours ago watching as this developed, and moments after it was clear what had happened, the first calls were coming in, and some of them were key allies of the United States. Very polite message of congratulations coming from President Macron and Prime Minister Starmer and others. Do you think that's what they really feel at this stage?
Oh, my gosh. Well, they're just being smart, because everybody knows Donald Trump has a reputation for holding a grudge. And so why not, if you're trying to serve your constituency back home in whatever country, why not extend the olive branch, reach out and say, hey, love you, great job, congratulations, let's see if we can work together. It's the only practical way forward, I would imagine. But is it what they really feel? Anybody else can be as good a judge.
One of the things I keep hearing is that President Trump holds a grudge. He doesn't. I mean, look at the people who were on stage time and time again supporting him. You had Megyn Kelly. You had people who were definitely anti-Trumpers, never Trumpers in 2016, and now they were there, and he welcomed them into the party.
Let's be clear what happened there. He welcomed them into the party when they bent the knee, and not sooner. Look at the smirk on his face when Megyn Kelly came up there. He made her submit, even though he treated her terribly.
See, this is one of those things that when you look at some of these people, they didn't bend the knee. Sure, they changed their mind, but they actually came back into around. You're making it seem like all of a sudden it was some power play against Megyn Kelly. Megyn Kelly is a very strong woman who definitely changed her mind, and she's changed her issues.
Okay, Megyn Kelly, for everyone who's watching around the world, is an American TV presenter. presenter.
Who lost a job after Donald Trump took issue with.
Exactly. William, among the first people, I was very interested, one of the first messages, telegrams that came from around the world came from the new Secretary General, Mark Rutte. He is the Secretary General of NATO. Do you think he's worried about what Trump might do?
He probably is worried to some extent because of the uncertainty. He may not be worried that Trump is going to reverse U.S. policy. The Europeans, even to a greater extent than in America, have for several years thought it was likely that Trump would win the election. And they've been preparing themselves. Most of the Europeans have been increasing their defense spending. They're playing greater roles in the war in Ukraine. For example, the Europeans, NATO, is now coordinating assistance rather than the United States, as was the case in the Biden administration. So they're prepared to work. They're prepared to step up to a greater extent. But there's a practical reality of whether the Europeans have enough defense equipment, defense capability to fill in for a significant part of what the U.S. provides. They don't have enough to fulfill all of U.S. role, but they can fulfill part of it.
OK. John, with regard to what's going on in the Middle East and Israel's war and the death toll, massive death toll in Gaza and Lebanon, which maybe was a factor for some young voters not supporting Harris, what do you think a Trump administration means?
I think certainly Trump and Bibi Netanyahu have had their differences at times, but I am expecting, and I think a lot of people that I talk to are expecting, that Trump is going to give Netanyahu, if anything, a freer hand, if that's possible, than the Biden administration already has in terms of carrying forth policies. Now, Netanyahu will have to navigate internal Israeli politics for sure as well, but I don't expect the Trump administration to be criticizing Bibi's handling of the conflict going forward very much. It is true, on the other hand, though, that Donald Trump likes to be able to say that there was minimal foreign conflict on my watch. And so if Netanyahu wants to expand the conflict in ways that could create other problems, it's not inconceivable that Trump wouldn't be a big fan of that at the end of the day.
And there's one other factor, which is that Trump keeps saying, it's the thing he keeps coming back to, he wants to win the Nobel Peace Prize. There we go. Gabriel, John and William, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.